first of all, thank you for having me. And I haven't really got a presentation on screen, but I've got some lovely pictures. So apparently if I click next, it'll come up. Oh, it's on that screen. Oh, my apologies.
We can see it though.
Oh, you can. It's just me. I can see it. Nutrition doesn't have to be boring. So apparently I'm going to bring the fun into your life. As a chef, I thought what I'd do is share some of the secrets, talk a little bit about the challenges of making food tasty, but also take into account some of the challenges that your patients and some of you as patients have. Because we take for granted something so simple as the enjoyment of eating. And that's it. Food should be fun. It should be nutritious, of course, but it should be tasty and enjoyable. Growing up, I grew up in a large family. I was adopted at the age of 6 years old. Grew up in a family, I was the youngest of six, and we all got together around the table. So the food is social. It's very much about a sense of coming together. And as I grew up in around the family, we all had chores, didn't really like washing up, didn't want to hoover, certainly didn't want to do the washing. I grew a passion for food from a very young age, and my father used to grow vegetables. So out and about, growing the vegetables, bringing it into the home, and Mum would turn them into what I would consider to be wholesome foods, lacking somewhat in flavour. Salt didn't really feature, vegetables were cooked far too long, and spices, they were an imaginative, exotic thing that didn't often grace our table. However, it was wholesome food, often grown from our garden, and simply braised and cooked into delicious meals. But I think the thing that I remember most isn't the detail of the cooking. It's the fact that we all got together as a community of a family, if you like, around the table, which forced us to talk to each other, which is pretty tough when you've got five elderly brothers and sisters who insist on taking the mick out of you. So I guess when I think about food, food is more than just a need of sort of living to eat. So we say, in French they say, you eat to live. So food is more than that. And the French also say that it's the essence of life itself. But they live to eat. They live to enjoy the food. It adds enjoyment to people's lives. It in itself is a cultural thing. I mean, you think of great food, you think of great cultures. Food is at the centre of that. And if you're on holiday, you're always looking to seek out places where the locals go. Food is technical. It's something that requires a technical ability and a mastery of technique, and of course an element of science. And above all, it represents getting together to enjoy life and also to celebrate and share. So it's a very social thing. But above all, for me, it's being able to provide a meal and enjoyment to people. And that's very difficult for people who perhaps, as you know, have been set back by their own personal story of getting cancer and then having to work around those challenges with surgical operations that deny them the simple pleasure of enjoying food. So some of the focus is to how do we amplify flavour? How do we make food enjoyable? Of course, nutrition in diet is really important, but to make food, you've got to make it look attractive. So we've got to take an ingredient such as artichoke and turn it into, and mushrooms such as yarrow, based products, fish such as proteins such as turbot and truffle if you can afford it, fruit, veg, bananas. When you make it look delicious, so something like a wholesome breakfast or a wonderful salad can be simply look delicious and give appetite. But to enjoy food, you use all of your senses, including common sense, may I add, when you're in the kitchen. But you can look, it's got to be appetizing, you can smell it, but above all, you taste it. But all of those emotions come together. So if you're denied one of those things, food becomes very denying you a sense of enjoyment. And so how do we get around that? How do we amplify taste? How can you take something that would be generally, okay and elevate it into something that's incredible? So nutrition throughout treatment is important, but ultimately, I remember my own story was, I was 25 years old, driving home on the motorway, fell asleep at the wheel, woke up in amongst a horrific car crash, lost my arm in the car crash, and ended up in hospital, losing my right arm. And when I was in hospital, it dawned on me that the food in hospital isn't particularly very good. And since my time in hospital, I spent some time working with the trust, or some trusts, to try and make food sexy, I think, in hospitals. And then you realise the huge challenges you have. But one of the key things that came out of it was that Yes, it's important that you're healthy and you get nutrition, but if you're starving, you don't eat at all, or you can't get the nutrients in, then actually and also you can't get the enjoyment and pleasure out of eating food, then that's not going to help either. So we put a lot of focus on how do we make food taste good and how do we make it approachable for people that are under treatment. So that made us thinking about how we then think about some of the saliva issues that you've got. How do you make food easy to swallow? And it's more than just pureeing things, because you can puree up a soup, but if it's not seasoned, doesn't have any flavour to it, there's no enjoyment in that. That takes me back to my school meals, in fact, where you felt like, you didn't want to eat it, and somebody's shouting at you saying, think of all the kids in Africa, and you just think, well, me being obese isn't going to help them. But it was kind of nonsensical. And so food needs to have a purpose, it needs to have flavour. And I was a joke, but I obviously meant it in good faith. Food has to be more than the sum of the parts of nutrition. It needs to be flavoursome. And you've got to build up flavours. And to do that, it's an actual technical ability. You'll need to think about layering up flavours and using things like spice. And I talked earlier about aromatic spices. And spices, when we talk about spices, everybody thinks about bloody heat. And you think, it's got chili in it. But no, when we talk about aromatic spices, we're talking about things like cumin, turmeric, spices like saffron and various other spices that elevate and layer up flavors. You're talking about using herbs. There are two types of herbs. There's herbs that's sort of more robust, and then there's green herbs at the end. If you add the green herb at the beginning, well, they lose most of its flavors. And we talk about using oils, essential oils. There's essential oils in everything. And you get more flavor imparting into food through oils or through fat than you will in anything else. So there's some very simple things that you can do to enhance your food by using particular techniques along the way. So when we talk about the art of flavor and working with good ingredients and building up flavors and creating different textures, this is where food becomes exciting. This is where I get excited. This is where I turn a simple salad or I think this is pretty simple, but well-presented food into something more than just that. It becomes an art form. First of all, we eat with our eyes. We say, well, wow, that good. And secondly, you're probably smelling it. But if you're denied sight, then obviously people are telling you it looks good. You take it for granted. But when you smell it, immediately you're aroused. And then there's expectation. With smell comes expectation. And then when you at first taste it, well, if it's tasty, it'll be moreish. And that's why we like to use that word. And when we present food, we can present it in a way that can be sharing. So this is where food becomes an art form, is when you take the ingredients and turn it into something that looks incredible. But ultimately, food without any depth of flavor, without any sense of purpose, becomes really just, for me, pointless. So how do we cook? How do we make something look so good in a hotel and turn it into something that is absolutely stunning? Well, we talked a little bit earlier about technique. When I think about food, I think about building up flavors. I think, well, okay, there's some things you can do. You start off with something simple as an onion. If you sweat an onion in oil, it's slightly different flavor profile than if you sweat it in butter. Butter emulsifies, so that means that when you blend it with something later, then it'll emulsify better. If you sweat it in olive oil, the oil won't emulsify so easy. But also, when you're sweating your onion, your pinch of salt can make a world of difference. I'll talk a little bit about salt in a minute, because salt is, for a lot of people, too much salt, you can't have salt. It's not a good thing, but actually salt is the salt of life in the kitchen, is through enhancing flavor. So a pinch of salt also draws out moisture. When you're sweating your onion, maybe put some garlic in there, and then you think about an element of spicing. If you're making a curry, you put your aromatic spices in, and you sweat it out at that point with your onion. And at that point, you can then start thinking about what else you're going to add, a stock. Now, water is just water, but when you add something to water, it becomes a solution, it becomes a stock. So if you've got onions sweating with garlic, with some spice and some herbs, when you add the water, immediately you've got a tasty stock. So if you put your vegetables into that stock to cook, you're then going to have a delicious soup as opposed to a bland soup. And that's where we talk about layering up flavors. If you're having a stew and you seal off your meat, you'll get more flavor, more intensity from caramelization. And that, simply by sealing off the meat, enhances that. And we're thinking about eating, and you think about braising. If you chop up your meat small as a dice and then braise it, and then when that stew has been cooked, the textures and fibers of the meat will break down. And instead of trying to chew it, you just break it apart and put it back through the sauce, and you have something really, really delicious. So we talk about treatments and how it affects, I was listening to some of the patients saying that they can't swallow. And actually that's quite a physical part of the enjoyment. It's not only the smell, but it's actually having it in your mouth and chewing it and being able to enjoy the texture of food and then being able to swallow it. And in itself, it gives you a sense of pleasure. And that means to say if you're denied the ability to chew it and taste it through the smell through your nose, you're relying on flavour coming up from the base of your throat up through that way. And that was really interesting to me. I hadn't even considered that. So you need to perhaps elevate the food a little bit more by using some of these techniques. I thought about this in sense of, food may taste differently before and especially during and after treatment. The treatment itself will make things bitter and change the metallical taste of it. So something as simple as understanding the difference between sweet, sour, salty sugar, heat and acidity, as in heat balanced with acidity or heat balanced with cream. These little techniques can simply help you navigate through some of those challenges and elevate your food. Food may taste differently, as we said before, but some foods may taste bland. You may lose a particular taste for a particular food, where others are more sensual. Food may also taste the same. They always say that everything tastes like chicken. It's a simple fact that actually chicken can taste very, very different because it's a good conduit for food. It can take on flavours. You can put it in a curry and it becomes something else. You can put it in a stew, put it with cream sauce. It's actually a very, very easy way. But it doesn't break down as a texture very well. Whereas, if you braise meat like beef or braise meat like lamb and let it braise very, 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 very long time, slowly cooked in the oven with vegetables, that will break down very, very easy. So, in essence, to make food tasty, it's all about seasoning. So elevates the flavour. It also aids the balance of electrolytes and also helps carry nutrients to cell and regulates this acidic base imbalance in your diet, supporting the transfer of nerve impulses and regulating blood pressure and secreting gastric acid. Now, I read that. I didn't know that until I searched it. They're all the good things that soap does. Too much soap can give you high blood pressure, heart disease and stroke. But there again, life's too short, so let's focus on the good things that soap does. What it does is elevate flavour. If you put a pinch of soap, and where did the word soap come from? It came from the word salary, to salt. They used to give the Romans just to get part of their pay in soap because it was that precious for them to sprinkle a bit of soap in their food to elevate the flavours. So if you're using soap, you can also use elements with it. Soap always elevates flavour, so if you're using acidity, if you're seasoning it, it will elevate that. But soap also contributes to the balance of a dish. So if you talk about salty, sugary, we also talk about sweet and sour. So what we have like Zing and Zen, they kind of go, it's a bit like Ant and Dec, they kind of go together, but they're different. If you've got sweet, you need acidity to help break through it. If you've got fattiness, you need a little bit of acidity to break through that as well. On the palate, you get that stickiness of the protein of fish. Lemon juice helps dissipate that. Heat, really strong heat. If you've got acidity, like in Thai cooking, they break it down with a little bit of lime acidity, or with curries, you get the heat and then you have the creaminess. If you have a very, very hot chili, the first thing you want to go for is some yogurt because that calms it right down. So when we're thinking about how do we use seasoning, knowing these things, the balancing act, I think, when I'm thinking about how you do that, if you've got a metallical taste, then by simply adding something sweet, that'll balance it out. So, for instance, something like maple syrup, agave, and nectar, and something like a squeeze of lemon can help balance out that dish. And also we're talking about butter and fat. That gives mouthfeel. So if you find it difficult to swallow and you haven't got saliva, having butter finishing through your soups or finishing with cream gives the viscosity in the sauce and gives the smoothness and helps you digest and swallow. And if things taste too salty, because this sometimes happens, you can control that by a little bit of acidity. Remember I said, or sweetness too, just to bring that down and so that you can do that. So very, very simple. Acidity also with soap can control other flavours and elevate too. And, if you don't want to do the sugar, you can add sweetener or natural sugar, things like honey or maple syrup. That's really good too. Other things that I like to think about in food is the presentation, of course, but also the other thing I like to say is it's just simple, almost goes without saying, simple. If you start off with your protein, what are you going to serve it with? Well, the first thing to think about is the seasons, and then you think about the vegetable. But we put a lot of weight on a lot of protein. And one of the benefits of proteins that I think is really superb is fish. Fish is really high in omega. It's also easy to digest. You can mash it down and blend it. And I find that flaky fish such as salmon, cod, is very, very good, very nutritious and easy to cook and mix into your food. Simple things like turning well-made soups out of vegetables into delicious meals can be simple as adding herbs in at the beginning and fresh herbs in at the end. For me, it's about layering up those flavors as we thought. Spice isn't just about heat. It's about using those aromatic spices and also using the oil to extract out when you're sweating the onion, the garlic, and all those spices in that oil. When you blend it later into your soup, you'll have a huge amount of flavor. I often say to people, stick to plants, wherever plants are, and put them at the center of your plates. And we've got a picture there of a lovely pigeon dish with the vegetable around the outside. But if you took away the pigeon, you'd have a beautiful plate of vegetables. But I often say, a vegetable can taste incredibly boring, but if you cook it in some herbs and spices, it'll then suddenly become something very, very different. I say also, the other opportunities I've written here is that you can roast vegetables. If you take vegetables like root vegetables this time of year and put them in the oven and roast them with some garlic and, some thyme, sage, those robust sort of herbs, roast them in the oven, then put them in a stock, vegetable stock, let it cook out, and then, of course, blend it. Or even if you just serve the roasted vegetable mashed up and bring it together, they can be delicious because when you roast your vegetables back through the oven with some herbs, you intensify the flavor. You're drying out the moisture, and then you really, really are intensifying the flavor. And then perhaps towards the end, not at the beginning, because if you're putting something in the oven at 80 degrees, towards the end, add your spice 5 minutes before the end so you don't burn them, so you're controlling that. And I think the thing is, somebody said to me, while they were ill, they were watching a lot of cookery programs for inspiration to find out how to get flavor into their food. And they've since become really interested in food because they learned to discover that the spectrum of flavor is incredible when you start discovering spices and herbs and different styles of cooking. One of the things I've often said is pasta's great, but pasta isn't just bloody big penne. You can get really small, delicious pasta that make it a lot easier more approachable to eat. If you cut up your vegetables really, really small, you can have a textured minestrone. And you can think of things like pho or bouillons or nice clear soups where you can almost get a minestrone effect, which make it tasty, give you an element of texture, but at the same time make it easy to digest and get loads of flavor in. And by simply adding herbs at the end or at the beginning into your cooking, you can really elevate and prolong the flavor of your food. And I think really when I talk about spices, I always think about persistence of flavor on the palate, which I think is really important. So when I'm thinking about proteins, I just think about why, everybody thinks about steak. Sometimes, even if it's not tough, the texture is very, very difficult. So think about braised meat, slow cooking, pulling off the meat off the bone, and then just shredding it down. But start off with a small dice so that you haven't got so much texture to have to deal with in the mouth. Fish, as I spoke, is absolutely fantastic. And also, just when I'm thinking about pasta, think about the size of the shells you can get, and also things like noodles, very soft noodles, easy to digest as well. I mean, as a chef, the art of food, as I say, looks absolutely stunning. But ultimately, this is a little video that takes us from, we call it farm to plate. So that's the art of cuisine. Now, I'm just going to fight. We're going to have some questions, but I'm going to talk a little bit about adversity. Now, at 25 years old, I lost my arm in a car accident, and I'm now, you can be kind, but I'm now I'm 54. Anyway, the point is, I look back at 25, before I lost my arm and had a terrible car accident and had to face up to the new life. One of the things that I realised is that life changes very, very quickly, and it puts you on a new trajectory. And you can either, as somebody said, embrace that and be positive. I mean, I could have dwelled a lot on the fact that why was it me? Why did I fall asleep? Why? And there was a lot of whys in the start of my recovery. But after that, those whys turned to, well, what if I died that day and could have nearly lost my life, and the fact that I didn't, then okay, so what can I do about my life and be more positive? And for me, food is the thing that got me through it. My energy and my whole life has been consumed by my love for food and my ability to cook good food. And that's become the focus point. And very quickly, the first year was small steps. And I used to look back and think, this time last year I had 2 arms and my life was much different. It wasn't better. I don't think it was necessarily better. We like to think, but I certainly appreciate life more now than I did before. And I used to think, for the first year it was all about looking back. And I used to think, well, my dreams, are, a lot better than the nightmare, the life I live. But as a year went by, I looked back and thought, well, this time last year I was struggling, and look where I am now. And you realise that, through the support of friends, family, and experts, you realise that actually things that are problematic initially become a new life, and then step by step you find the confidence, and also you find the company of others, the people who've been through it, and also those people that have spoken today and yesterday. They give you the courage and also their life story to help you get through and recover. And for me, the reason why I'm here today is because I can empathise with your challenges of dealing with adversity, and I commend all of you for your bravery, but also for your perseverance. Life is far too short, and my joy in life is being able to cook. But I also know that food and flavour brings a huge amount of enjoyment to people's lives. So, and this is an amazing scheme that Chris is introducing about, us being able to highlight restaurants where people can go and eat food more easily, and we're on board with that, and we're going to support that campaign and try and encourage other people to get on board with that. So I'm really, really pleased to have been here to speak to you today, and I'm going to allow you, if you have any questions about food or anything-ish, then I'm more than happy to answer them if I can. Thank you.